I'm going to mute my cell phone. Good morning, everyone. This is the June 19th meeting, special meeting for the Access Advisory Committee. Welcome. I ask that everyone please mute their cell phones as I'm doing right now. And Mr. Chairman.
Yes, this is Jim. I'd like to call the meeting to order. And number 2 is roll call and introduction of staff and public. Sarita, could you read off the names of the members and the staff and whoever's else online, please?
Yes, I will. Mr. Chairman, James Marston.
Here.
Robert Burnham. Sean Garrell.
Here.
Thank you. Nick Kuntz.
Here.
Janice Rodriguez.
Here.
Barbara Silver.
Here.
And Suzanne Tejada.
Here.
Council liaison is Megan Harmon, Santa Barbara City Council member. Megan Harmon. Our staff liaisons are Brian Demore. I see that you are here, but I do not hear you. You may need to unmute yourself or turn up your microphone. And Adriana Morales, who is our co-organizer and administrative assistant with the City of Santa Barbara. Mr. Marston?
Yes. I don't see Bob listed. I thought you had him.
I know that Bob is having trouble dialing in, and Adriana was working with him on dialing in.
Okay. Are there any people from the public who are online?
Let us just see. I see that we have 3 attendees from the public: Accessible Santa Barbara, Bonnie Elliott, and Brian Hollander.
Okay, thank you. Number 3 is announcements. All I have right now is that we do have a meeting. I think it's August 14, was it, Sarita? Could you check that?
I believe our next meeting is scheduled for August 14th at 9:30 a.m. Location to be determined.
Okay. Are there any other announcements, please? If not, we'll go to public comments. These are comments from the public that have to do not with anything on the agenda, but general comments. And you have up to 5 minutes to speak. Do we have any public comments at this time?
I see that Accessible Santa Barbara does have a public comment. I must give this caveat. You have 5 minutes to speak. Please click the raise lower hand icon on your computer. The meeting organizer, will notify and unmute you when it is your turn to speak. Accessible, Brian Hollander has raised his hand. Please, Accessible Santa Barbara, please click the unmute button. A green microphone icon indicates that you are unmuted and able to speak. Accessible Santa Barbara, would you like to speak now? Accessible Santa Barbara, would you like to speak now?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I will start the timer when you begin.
Hi, Will Railing, Accessible Santa Barbara. Good morning, everyone, to the first ever virtual meeting of the Access Advisory Committee. Very excited about having virtual meetings. Still a bit concerned about the accessibility of the city's chosen GoToWebinar platform. And I hope, for example, that committee member Burnham is able to join the meeting soon. I think that being able to make virtual comments is a great thing for people who have physical difficulties. And I hope there might be a way, even after the crisis to facilitate people being able to communicate with the meeting from home in the future as well. I was thinking today, it being June 19th, about the upcoming anniversary of the 30th year of ADA and the context of the history of progress and human rights and civil rights. And you know, this being June 19th, I mean, the idea that 155 years ago it was illegal to own a human being, you know, is just so horrible to consider. It was 100 years ago that American women were considered so inferior that they weren't allowed to vote. By the way, it's another big anniversary coming up, August 18th this summer, the 100th anniversary of suffrage. 93 years ago, the US Supreme Court held in an 8-to-1 vote in the case of Buck versus Bell that it was legal to forcibly sterilize people because they had a disability, and tens of thousands of people were forcibly sterilized as a result. So my point is twofold. On the one hand, there's been tremendous progress in human rights in a short period of time. On the other hand, that short period of time is a short period of time. This history was not that long ago, and we'll never escape it, and we have to be mindful of it. And I think the ADA fits into that context 30 years ago in taking a huge giant step forward in civil rights. And I hope that the committee, because the anniversary of ADA is on July 26th, and there won't be another committee meeting until August, as was just mentioned, I hope it might be possible for perhaps a subcommittee or the committee informally in some way to participate in whatever the city has planned to commemorate the 30th anniversary. I suspect there'll be a mayoral proclamation in July or something along that lines. 5 years ago, for the 25th anniversary, Bob Burnham represented the committee at City Council and gave just such an amazing speech. I just listened to it again the other day. And so that's all I have to say for now. Thank you, and looking forward to having a productive meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Reilly.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Railing.
Bonnie Elliott, would you like to speak? Please raise your hand. Brian Hollander, would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Let me know when you're ready to begin.
I'm ready to begin.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Brian Hollander, and I'm the program manager at Independent Living Resource Center here in Santa Barbara, serving Santa Barbara, Ventura, and San Luis Obispo counties, and providing advocacy and services to people across the spectrum of disabilities. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with the Access Advisory Committee about the upcoming 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Signed into law on July 26, 1990, the ADA is one of the first laws in the world to ensure people with disabilities have equal access to stores, public transportation, communication, and employment opportunities. By requiring accessibility, such as the widening of bathroom doors, putting lifts on buses, having closed captions on television programs, and much more, the ADA assists people with disabilities to live independently while enjoying full access to their communities. However, even though the ADA has been around for nearly 30 years, the law is not perfect. It can be a long and costly battle for people who want to use the law to change the practices of discrimination by businesses or government entities, courts and legislatures have tried to give businesses more time to comply with the law or sought to narrow its application. Through all these challenges, though, the disability community keeps fighting for access. The ADA was not a handout to our community. Rather, it came about after 30 years of struggles, sit-ins, and even crawling on our knees to demonstrate the need for justice. I would like to thank the committee for their advocacy to ensure that the ADA is fully implemented in Santa Barbara. I would also like to thank the many city staff who work with us every day to increase access in our fair city. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Thank you, Brian.
Mr. Chair?
I was wondering, did you have a chance to get Bonnie Elliott? You said she was also listed as a public comment.
I see her. She has not raised her hand to speak. And she is self-muted.
Okay.
You
All
might
right.
want to, do you guys have the ability to unmute Bonnie remotely?
She is self-muted, so I cannot unmute her.
Hi.
Oh, Bonnie, there you are.
I'm sorry. I just figured out how to unmute. I'm sorry, but I'm just going to listen. I don't have anything to say.
Thank you. Mr. Chair?
Well, right now I have the 5-minute thing is still up. Can you get rid of the 5-minute timer? Okay, thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
The next item is approval of the minutes. Does anyone have any comments on the minutes that they have read and reviewed?
I like the level of detail in these minutes. I think they're the best minutes yet. Thank you very much.
I have numerous issues with the minutes regarding blue curb parking. They strike me as a disaster of comical proportions, lacking both substance and context. The changes are too numerous to slog through here, so I'd like to suggest that I email staff with suggested changes and move that we defer a vote on approval of the minutes until next AAC meeting.
Do I hear a second on that motion?
I'll second it. This is Barbara.
Okay. Oh, that reminds me, it's since we don't have video, it'd be nice if people try to introduce themselves before they talk, so the minutes can be better. So it's been moved and seconded that we postpone the approval till the next meeting after Mr. Coons has sent in his comments to staff. Okay. The next item is the ADA coordinators report.
As a
Brian,
point of order, do we need a roll call vote on that?
we probably do. Sarita, could you read off the roll call?
Roll call. We did the roll call.
Well, I mean, for a vote.
Oh,
Can you read
for
it?
the vote for the minutes?
Yes.
Yes. Mr.
Thank you, Nick.
Marston?
Yes.
Sarita, you got that this is a vote to not approve the minutes. We're going to send comments and approve them next time. And so that's the motion on the floor, and I vote aye on it.
Okay, thank you. Sean Garral?
Nay.
Janice Rodriguez?
Nay.
Barbara Silver?
Yes.
And Suzanne Tejada?
I have a question. If Nick is going to send comments, does that mean the minutes are going to be revised and reissued?
That would be the hope.
Okay, then I said aye.
And we still don't have Mr. Burnham?
No, he is actually trying to call me at this minute.
Okay.
This is Barbara. Nick, can you send us the, or at least the members of the committee, your emendations at the same time you send them to Sarita?
I think that would be okay. It would probably be better if I sent them to staff and staff sent them to the entire committee for review, I think.
That would be good, because normally in a meeting, the changes to the minutes, we would hear them before. We would hear them.
Yeah, I'll endeavor to make these red line edits so everybody can see what, I mean, you know, the first item on the minutes reflecting my detailed discussion of the Blue Curb initiative is pick low-hanging fruit. That has no context or substance as to what I was actually suggesting. And it gets a little better as we go down. So
I understand that, and I was listening last night to the audio for our meeting, but I didn't listen to it thoroughly and carefully, but I know that the details are always there in the audio. So
right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, if we don't have Mr. Burnham, then it's time for the ADA coordinator's report. Brian, are you ready to fill us in?
Brian DeMore, please turn up your microphone.
Sarita, this is Barbara. While we're waiting for Brian, what's happening with Bob and Adriana?
Bob needs to enter an audio pin, which I've just sent him. Adriana, if you can see that pin and try and call Bob and get him to enter that pin number in, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
You hear me now?
Barely.
Is that yes?
Barely. If you can turn up your microphone.
Please turn up the microphone. I know how to turn up the speaker.
Oh.
So you need to speak louder?
It's getting a little louder, a little better.
Okay, I'll just try to speak loudly and clearly. It sounds like that will help. I'm not sure. We did well on the text map, and then we can differently at this point.
We're
Okay.
still not. I'll ask the committee members if they can hear Brian.
Only muffled. This is Barbara.
Okay.
I can hear that someone is connected, but I can't understand. I thought it was Bob.
Sarita, it sounds like you hear me somewhat. Could we move on to the subcommittee reports, and I will play around with the microphone a little bit more and see if by the time subcommittee reports are done, I'll be able to go.
Hey, you just got a little bit better.
Well, but for no rhyme or reason, I'm afraid it'll get worse. It's the same way, it got better.
Well, I'll take Brian's advice and we'll skip to the subcommittee reports now and hope that Brian can get a better connection. Nick, do you want to give a subcommittee report on the Blue Curb Committee?
I'm inclined to suggest that we take a break and wait for our ADA coordinator to get connected. I'm concerned that you know, the substance of our discussion will be lost if people are not able to be connected and engaged.
Is Bob back yet? This is
No.
Barbara.
This is Jim. I think that was a good suggestion from Mr. Kuntz. We need to get Brian's report scheduled in the right spot, and also we need to get Mr. Burnham back on. So can we take a break?
Let's all just, yeah.
All
I
right, I'm going
wouldn't-
to, this is Sarita, I'm going to close my webcam and try and contact Bob.
I wouldn't suggest that anyone
Sarita?
disconnects.
No,
Sarita?
yes?
Hi, everyone. This is Vince Wong. I'm working with Mr. Burnham. He was able to listen to most of our conversation. He was just not able to speak. So we're working on the audio problems right now, and he should be logging on in about 5 minutes to be back on.
Oh, okay. This is Barbara. Is somebody working with Brian too to get him on board? I guess
Brian
not.
Diamore
Yes.
is on. He's on the call.
But we
He's
were
got audio problems.
Sure, I will work
Vince?
with Brian as well.
Yes, we could
Yes.
barely hear him. It was as if he was muffled.
Oh, okay. He must have connectivity issues. Brian, can you please speak so everyone can hear you? Brian, can you please speak?
I'm assuming you mean the other Brian. I stepped out of the room for a second.
Is this Brian Diamore or Brian, the other Brian?
This is Brian Hollander.
Oh, hi, Brian. Hi. Yes.
Yeah, for clarification, Brian Hollander, we are trying to get Brian Diamore connected.
Adriana,
see
can you
Brian
please
is-
work with Brian Diamore?
They're sounding muffled.
We can hear
Hey,
you
I
now,
just-
Brian. You were just talking. Can you?
Sarita, I just logged in on my tablet, but I'm not a panelist. Maybe that will work better.
You are a panelist. You're fine. You're talking right now. You're fine, Brian.
You hear me?
But
Vince, that audio quality is not acceptable.
Brian,
And
can you use a
Mr.
headset?
He's trying to get on another tablet that's not authorized.
Who?
Mr. Diamore is asking that somebody authorize his other tablet, which is connected, but it is not a panelist.
Go ahead and try now, Brian.
On my tablet or on? Okay, now I'm.
Yeah. Do you have a headset, Brian? The audio is very bad.
He's on a headset. As I understand it.
How is the audio now?
Much better.
Okay,
Great,
I'm
perfect.
getting an
There you go.
echo. I hear
Okay, we'll
myself,
troubleshoot.
but-
Yeah, you have to turn off one of your
course.
devices there, Brian. Okay, so I will work with Mr. Burnham on the side. If you would like to take a break, that is fine. If you'd like to proceed, that is fine as well. It's up to you, Mr. Chair.
Well, Vince, you said that Bob can hear us. He just can't speak.
Yeah, he said he was able to hear us. So I'm
Okay.
working with him so that he can speak as well.
Okay. Well, if it's okay, Brian could talk and Bob can listen, and hopefully you can get Bob hooked up with us soon.
Yes, working on it. Okay,
Okay.
thank you, folks.
All right, Brian, you're free to go.
Brian, if you're speaking, you must be muted again.
There we go.
Okay, I am now unmuted. Do you hear me?
Yes.
oh, wonderful.
I don't know what was going on. I'm using the same Of course, I left my normal headphones at home today, the one day where I shouldn't have. But the pair that I'm using, it seems to work on the tablet just fine, but not when it's plugged into the computer. So go figure.
This is
All
Jim.
right.
I'm gonna butt in for a second. Sarita, why doesn't Brian show up on our list? Is he not an attendee?
He is a staff member,
Okay.
and that's where he's showing up. He's not, remember, attendees are members of the public.
Okay. Well, I'm looking at staff and I don't see him unless I'm missing something.
He's in there actually twice. He's just above
Oh, okay.
Janice.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
I'm gonna
He's-
step, okay.
Okay. He's in there twice. I see. Okay. I'm gonna unmute myself and let Brian talk. Thank you, Brian.
Okay, great. Sorry for these technical delays. Hopefully we'll be able to get through the agenda today. If we don't, one thing we can talk about at the end is whether we want to meet again before whatever date that was in August that we had talked about. There's no reason why we can't do another meeting, especially if they're virtual. It's a little bit easier in some ways. Nobody has to travel. So we'll just see how far we get today. But the ADA coordinators report, I don't have as much under this as I have in the past. One quick thing I wanted to talk to you all about is I got an email from one of our planners in community development who is working on the objective design standards, which they need to do in response to Senate Bill 35, which is a streamlined ministerial approval process for qualified multi-unit and mixed-use residential projects. So community development is working on those design standards. They have a draft that's on the website, and it's been presented to the ABR and the HLC, and they're in the process of editing those standards based on the response to comments from the board members and to the public. So she wanted to make sure, Rosie Deisty, who's the planner on this, she wanted to make sure that the Access Advisory Committee was aware of these efforts and had the ability to participate in that public review process. So what I was thinking I would do is just send out her message, which is addressed to the Access Advisory Committee, talking about this and where you can go to see the standards, and you can respond directly to her with any comments. But rather than just forward that to you all, because she reached out to me last week, I said I would mention it under my ADA coordinators report to give it some context when you see that message. I don't know a lot about what Senate Bill 35 is or what these objective design standards are, so it's more just passing that along for your opportunity to review.
Brian, will that be sent to us by email or on a staff report? How will we receive that? This is Jim.
You know, I think it'll just be a separate email for this specific thing. To me, that seems like it'll work better than having it tied to the draft minutes or anything else. So look for that. It'll just be a separate email.
Well, my question is, Brian, will it come out under your name or under Sarita's name?
I'm not sure. It'll probably depend on which one of us has the time to tackle it. I have the draft email from Rosie, so it may come from me, but it'll just depend on time. It'll be one of the two of us. So.
Okay, I just wanted to be.
Sorry, go ahead, Barbara.
I just wanted to be aware so that I would catch it when it came in with bushels of other things. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is Nick Kuntz. I have a question. Do you know where they are in that process? my concern is that, for one, I'm just ecstatic that we're being included as a stakeholder in this process, something that I've been looking to have more engagement from staff on such issues. But I'm concerned that when we do get informed of this stuff, it has in the past been quite late in the process, and I think that my knee-jerk reaction to this is, please send it right away. Don't hold off and wait for the next meeting to tell us about it. We often don't get enough time to fully review and contemplate this stuff.
Right. So in the message, and I'll try to get that out today, but you'll see that she's requesting comments by the end of July. And then she outlines the next steps, which say that the design standards and related zoning ordinance amendments are tentatively scheduled for Planning Commission review in early September, followed by City Council hearing for adoption. So
Wonderful.
That was the
like,
level of detail we needed to be able to understand what you were telling us. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah. Okay, I have just two other things that I wanted to mention under this ADA coordinators report before we start getting into the meat of this agenda. And one of them has already been mentioned, so I guess we'll start with that one. That is the annual report to council. And the last time we met, we talked about trying to get that to coincide as closely as possible with the 30-year anniversary of the ADA, which was July 26th, which would be July 26th, 2020. So we have a council meeting on July 28th, it looks like. That would be the nearest council meeting to that 30-year anniversary. When things first went virtual, I think my initial reaction was, well, you know, if we're going to do this annual report and try to do some kind of a proclamation and have people speaking at council, I wasn't sure what that was going to look like in this virtual mode. So initially my thought was, well, let's wait until we get back to regular meetings again. But at this point, I have no idea when that's going to happen, and I don't want to put this out indefinitely. It seems like it carries a lot more weight to do the 30-year recognition as close as possible to that July date. So if the committee's on board with it, I think we'd be targeting a July 28th annual report to council that would also include a proclamation and probably be looking to a member or two from the committee who would be willing to speak and I was going to say be up there at council, but would likely be virtually. So I don't know that we need a motion on that, but you know, if there's any objection to that plan, let me know.
This is Barbara. No, that sounds good. That addresses my concerns about when this was going to happen. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This is Nick Kuntz. I feel like somebody from this committee should meet and discuss prior to these events. It had been suggested that maybe we have a full AAC meeting before the next scheduled. I would be open to the idea of a full AAC meeting prior, or an ad hoc committee to work on related issues.
This
Okay,
is Barbara.
yeah.
I think an ad hoc committee might be the best way to negotiate who from our committee might be the speaker for city council.
Yeah, and I think that would fall under the purpose of an ad hoc. You know, it's supposed to be limited duration for a specific purpose, and if it was to prepare for this annual report, that seems like that would make sense. I don't think I was on board when prior ad hoc committees were formed and what the actual process was of forming that, but if
This is Barbara, and also it was Bob who spoke 5 years ago, and we don't have him available to us for this meeting, apparently. So another reason to postpone this, to move this to an ad hoc committee rather than resolving it right now.
Well, this is Jim.
Can
That's two
we-
different items, actually. One is who's going to speak about the ADA anniversary. The other one is the actual report to council. And I think normally we've always looked at those ahead of time and gave suggestions to the coordinator on what to put in there. So someplace we have to find out how are we going to decide what to put in our annual report. So I think we need a meeting or at least an ad hoc. Or Brian, do you already have those items laid out for the annual report, or you want input from us?
I do not have that laid out now. Any ideas right now would be great. I think if we get into much of a discussion on this, we're not going to get to some of the other items. So I do like the idea of an ad hoc so that we can have a focused meeting in advance of that July 28th council meeting.
Sarita, can you check in, or maybe Vince can tell us what the status of Bob's connection is? Is he still listening? Is he able to talk yet?
Vince is trying to get Bob on the phone so that he can at least listen. I tried to get him to listen through my cell phone, but it wasn't working out for him. So we're still trying.
Okay.
Well, this is Jim
I
again.
just-
Does that mean that Bob is just on his phone and Vince can't get through to him because he's already on a phone?
I believe so. Give me one moment and let me see if I can call him. I'm going to mute myself.
Yeah, so Mr. Burnham is he's listening. He just left me a message. He is listening on everything that you're talking about. We're trying to get him to connect audio so that he can contribute. So he is listening to everything you're talking about right now.
Are you able to communicate with him, Vince? Are you currently
I'm not able to
connected?
call in. I'm not able to call in with him because he is using the phone to listen into the conversation. So if you don't mind, I think we can go ahead and take a break, maybe a 10-minute break right now, and then we'll try to get Mr. Burnham back on.
Yeah, because I'd like to
Would that be
have
okay?
his take on this.
Okay, so Mr. Burnham, we're going to be taking a break right now. I know that you are listening on this
Okay.
meeting.
Hold on a
so
second,
we can
Vince.
go ahead.
I just got a call from Bob. He says that you need to unmute him from your end, Sarita.
No, he needs to go ahead and type in his PIN number. If his PIN number is not in, it won't work. And I think yesterday, during our trial run, he did the same thing. He accidentally pressed another number, and the system allows you to come in, even if you type in the wrong number. So if he can do it again, I think that will work.
Bob?
And I did send him new information.
Bob, are you still there?
I can only imagine how frustrating this is for Bob. And I
Yes,
hope this
yes,
underscores the problematic nature of the GoToWebinar and their inability to accommodate 508 compliance. And this committee should be working harder to provide alternate solutions.
Yeah, I think in this case, Mr. Kunz, it is a matter of accidentally pressing on another key, because we have tried this during our trial run and it was working fine. So common mistakes can happen.
Yeah, I can appreciate that idea, but if you are completely blind, you have no
I agree with you.
concept of how difficult or how easy it is to accidentally hit the wrong button. And if you don't have
Yeah.
an interface that accommodates your needs, then it's practically impossible to be successful. And GoToWebinar has made a willful decision not to be 508 compliant, and the city has an obligation to have a compliant means for the public to engage even in time of COVID, and especially on the Access Advisory Committee. So
I agree
to
with you, Mr.
write
Coons.
this off as user error is more than insensitive.
I agree. I didn't mean to come through that way.
If Jim is on the phone, Vince, can
Yes.
he give Bob the audio PIN number, which is
Nancy!
pound 48208 pound?
Can everybody please mute themselves, please? Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Great. Yeah, I think the Mr. Burnham's just having. It's hard for Mr. Burnham to enter a PIN number. The system is saying that the PIN number has not been entered yet.
Can you see the PIN number?
Vince, this is Barbara. I've had problems like he's having in the past. It is very frustrating. I think that we should take a break for 5 minutes now and see what can be done to get Bob.
I agree with you.
And if we cannot, then we need to postpone this meeting, because this is just a really good demonstration of why GoToMeeting is not adequate for our needs.
Okay, great. Yeah, let's take a 10-minute break, if that's okay with Mr. Chair. And let's see if we can go ahead and help Mr. Burnham.
I'm texting him the PIN number.
Okay, this is Chair Marston again. Bob has called me on his cell phone and left a message. Vince, do you have his cell phone number?
I don't. Do you want to publicly say it here because we're recording a meeting, or do you want to give it to him?
No, I don't want to do that. But I'm wondering if you keep. I'm asking a question here. How are you talking to Bob if he's already on the phone trying to listen to us? How are you talking to him about entering this darn PIN number?
Jim, he has been sending me text messages, so I will try and call him on his cell number.
Okay. Well, this is very frustrating. This is not accessible for our members.
I'm sure.
Let's take 10 minutes. What time is it now?
It is 10:15.
Good grief. Okay.
Hey, Bob. Okay.
Did I just hear Bob?
You hear him through Sarita's microphone.
Okay.
And, as a temporary solution, maybe just Sarita putting him on speakerphone, and we could communicate through Sarita's connection with Bob.
I just saw that Bob was able to unmute himself.
Hi guys, can you hear me?
Go ahead and try, Bob. There you go.
Yes,
hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, between the wrong phone number and the wrong PIN numbers, it's been a challenge, but I'm here now.
Great, Bob.
Welcome aboard.
I've been listening since the beginning of public comment, and what happened each time I called back a couple times, and each time it said the moderator has muted the conference on their end. So it was the same problem we had, I think, a couple of practice times ago. And I'm not sure what happens. if I had called in earlier, I probably would have got on and been able to mute and unmute myself from the get-go. But because something happened later in the meeting, I'm not sure, because I know you give me a couple different PIN numbers, and the latest
Well,
one
the
seems.
important thing is you're here now, Bob.
I am.
We're glad to have you on.
So without further ado.
Yeah, let's
I'll
get back
mute
to this
myself.
agenda. So,
Go
Bob,
ahead.
I had a question directly for you with the discussion of the possibility of forming an ad hoc committee to address the report to council and potential recognition of the 30th anniversary of the ADA. You gave such a great speech 5 years ago. I'm wondering if you would be willing, if the committee would agree, to have you speak again on our behalf.
I would be, and with input from you guys on maybe some updates from that original speech. Probably need to do a few revisions. A lot of what I said, I think, is still pertinent today, but in light of COVID-19, maybe a few scenarios that relate to that, maybe we do need to do some updates.
Is there anyone else on committee who would be interested in giving a presentation besides Bob?
This is Barbara. I'm interested in having input into Brian's report to council, since he's rather new and I'm the one who was pushing to restore reports to council from our committee.
This is Jim, and I greatly appreciate that, because I was going to nominate you, Barbara, to be on that committee to help with the report. So who else would like to help Brian flesh out a report to council besides Barbara?
And also the comments. I think the same ad hoc committee could do both these things.
Okay.
Do we all, for discussion purposes, sorry, this is Nick Coons, before we, I mean, maybe it doesn't even need to go to a vote. Does anybody feel strongly one way or the other that this should be one or two separate ad hoc committees?
This is Jim. I don't see a big problem in having one committee. If you think so, let's discuss that.
I don't have a strong inclination one way or the other. I just wanted to give it some thought and make sure that, there wasn't someone who did have a feeling on the subject. I could see it going either way. So if in the interest of ongoing discussion, I think we have Bob is interested in speaking for us. I didn't hear anyone else interested in doing that. Barbara is interested in participating in guidance with the report. We'll need a third member. Does anybody else want to sign up for this?
How about yourself, Nick?
Well, I kind of feel like I'm on every one of these ad hoc committees. So I don't want to steal all the limelight. I would like to give everyone an opportunity to participate, but if no one else is stepping up, I will fall on the sword.
Well, Nick, here's the issue. This has to do with the arc of history for the ADA, which our committee is part of, and I think you are also part of the history leading up to this in a way that other people are not. So that's my reaction.
Well, I appreciate that, and as always, I'm willing to participate, but want to make sure that no one else is feeling left out.
Okay. Well, this is Chairman Jim. I'm going to ask, does anyone else want to participate and leave Nick off the hook?
This is Bob Burnham.
Yeah.
This is Bob. I don't know if Nick, your presentation a couple council meetings ago on the 10 points of the pullback on accessibility were just outstanding. I mean, 5-star. So I would love you to be able to give a speech in with the 30th ADA proclamation, if we can somehow share comments, that's fine with me. But your eloquence is right there, and I'd be happy to either share a speech with you or support you in any way I can, if you'd be willing to do it.
Okay, we can discuss further. I have some reservations. My frustration levels with the status of ADA in this city are quite high. And I'm not sure I could give an optimistic perspective.
Nick, this is Barbara. So, you know, he commented on your eloquence, but I'll comment on your passion. And that is what is actually needed for this committee, is that kind of passionate energy, in my opinion.
Well, thank you for that. And as I said, I'm happy to do it. I just, so moving on, I guess we take it to a vote. We have a 3-person committee. Is there any further discussion?
This is Brian Demore. I just wanted to jump in. It seems like my other bullet point, my last thing that I wanted to cover under the ADA coordinator's report is a lot tied to this, and it may perhaps interest some other people to participate, or maybe the whole group decides then they want to be part of this. But previously we talked about updating the resolution, and I think there was this idea that, hey, there's going to be some momentum around the 30th anniversary. What better time to dust off that resolution to make it maybe more relevant or meaningful, or however you want to try to describe it. But when I'm talking about the resolution, I'm talking about the resolution that describes this committee. So that's another piece that it would be great. I don't know if it's overly ambitious at this point, but it's what we talked about, and I think there's still time to pull it off.
I agree, that would be fantastic if we could get that in here for July council. My concern there is that Chair Marston has a fair bit of input, and how do we make sure that his input is shared without any Brown Act impropriety?
Well, this is Chair Marston. I appreciate that, Nick, but I think that Bob and I have already discussed his and our proposed changes when we had an ad hoc on the resolution. So I think that Bob is on board with me, or I'm on board with Bob as far as that. So perhaps if Bob wants to head up that resolution change, I think he already knows my stance. So I think that might cover it. That sound okay with you, Bob?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Nick, for that confidence. But I think the same group could work on that resolution. That would be a good idea, Brian, to have that and have the ADA report to council and also an ADA celebration proclamation. So if it's okay with everybody else, I think we should have a vote on this, set up the ad hoc committee and move on forward.
So moved. This is Bob, so moved.
Barbara,
Okay.
second.
Okay. Sarita, can you call the names for a vote then to create an ad hoc committee of Bob Burnham, Barbara Silver, and Nick Kuntz to help Brian with these reports?
Barbara Silver and Nick Coons to help Brian with reports. Jim Marston,
Yes.
Nick Coons,
Yes.
Sean Garrell,
Yes.
Robert Burnham,
Yes.
Janice Rodriguez,
Yes.
Barbara Silver,
Yes.
Suzanne Tejada.
Yes.
I believe that is everyone. Oh, Jim Marston. Jim? Jim, are
I
you
heard
still muted?
you called Jim
I-
Marston first and
Oh,
he
okay.
said yes.
I was
All right.
called first. Okay,
Thank you.
okay, all right. Okay, that passes. Brian, in your report, did you want to mention anything about the transition plan? I know it's been up in the air, probably not much has been done, but that's usually in your ADA coordinator's report. Is there anything to report on the plan itself? Anything that's been done? Is Brian online?
He is online. He is. Self-muted.
I was, for a moment, I was muted by the organizer, so I couldn't unmute myself. No, I don't have a lot today to present on that, but that's something that I can work on with the ad hoc. And then when we get to the budget, I'll have just a little bit to share about
Okay.
the transition plan.
Are you done with your report now, Brian?
Yes, that is it for item number 6.
Okay. Now we're going to have subcommittee reports. I know Nick has stuff to say about the Blue Curb Committee.
All right. Unfortunately, I don't have much to report on the Blue Curb Subcommittee. I gave an extensive presentation at the previous AAC meeting, and all action items were for staff. And it doesn't look like we have any forward motion on any of those action items. In fairness, we have had a major disruption of COVID, and I did not follow up with staff to make sure these things were moving forward either. So that's where we are.
Nick, this is Chair Marston. Is there any quick way you can review what the follow-up items for staff were, or do you have that handy or not?
Yeah. There was two major. There was a number of little things that fell under a major category of website information to be reviewed and updated.
Oh, yes.
In the beginning of this meeting, when we were reviewing minutes, we saw that there was low-hanging fruit was the top item, and that was all of this website information kind of fell into that discussion where I used the term low-hanging fruit in February. So that was all. I presented a report, shared it with staff to share with the entire committee, and there was a section with a heading readily achievable, and it was a lot of just consolidating web content, mainly adding a couple of things that already existed, bring back the Blue Curb map, publish the parking guide that we worked on over the last 2 years. That's still not, it's been approved, but it's still not published. And it's a lot of little stuff that really, I don't see what, it's less than an hour's worth of work total for staff, in my opinion. So that's the bulk of it. There was also, and one of my frustrations with the meeting minutes is that I had suggested that, and I think we all agreed that the Blue Curb initiative draft should be forwarded to downtown parking for comments and come back to the AAC. And, I'm very frustrated with the ongoing lack of movement or engagement from staff, particularly downtown parking staff on this issue. And that if we weren't engaged, I might be compelled to take my concerns directly to council and ask for a moratorium on the blue curb removal. And I remember there was some objection from the members of this committee that I might be jumping the gun there, that I should give this process and staff a chance. But here we are, another 6 months later. And years are passing. I've been on this committee since 2017 trying to get some action on blue curbs. And it's just all in one ear and out the other. And I'm beyond frustrated with this.
Thank you, Nick. May I suggest that maybe Brian, that you could get someone from downtown parking and Nick and try to attack these things that have been brought up for quite a few meetings and try to get some movement on this? Is that something Brian could do with downtown parking and get this settled out?
The meeting minutes reflect that I was just going to take this directly to council, but that's not accurate. It was my suggestion that might be an alternative approach if staff didn't want to engage. And so there's a good example of how I'm feeling that the minutes are not accurate. And I'm shocked that members of this committee have appeared to object to my desire to get accurate meeting minutes.
Excuse me, what do you mean we object to your efforts to get accurate meeting minutes?
I heard 2 dissenting votes on the motion to defer a vote on this last February meeting minutes.
Thank you.
Brian, are you there? Can you set up something to get some action here with downtown parking and Nick and try to move these things forward?
I think what I would recommend is that probably sometime next week, Nick and I have a conversation and I can get kind of reoriented on where all of this is and what some of the key priorities are. I have access, just being here in the office, to some of the downtown parking staff. I would say that it's not always easy to get their attention, but it's certainly easier for me to do that than it would be for somebody externally. And if I could know, what are some of the key 1 or 2 things and begin to chip away at this, I think sometimes the ask gets to be, I don't want to say too big, because there's nothing that's too big when you're dealing with accessibility concerns. But it can become too big for staff to feel like it's something that they can take action on. So I can try to help facilitate that and maybe feed it to them in pieces that they can actually do something with, because it has gone too long without any meaningful action taking place, and that's unfortunate.
This is Chair Marston again. Brian, I think that's a good idea. I would be willing to also meet with you and Nick if needed be, but I think something next week we could start to hammer out some stuff. So Nick, it's up to you if you would like me to join you and Brian, but you set up the time and let's try to knock some stuff out of the park here, okay?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I'll
Okay.
defer my comments till later.
Okay, so Nick, you set it up with Brian, okay? You and Brian discuss that
Okay.
offline. Okay, thank you. Okay, the other 2 staff reports or subcommittee reports would be valet parking, which has not gotten back to us at all, so that's just on hold. Sidewalk committee, we haven't had a meeting since the last time. Jim Dewey had said that he would try to do 2 fixes of all the list of the 10 or so that Nick laid out on those parkways that aren't accessible or blocked accessible parking. But Jim told me he let that slide and didn't do anything in the last 3 months. So he had said we're going to do stuff, but he said he was sorry he didn't get to it. So that's all I can say from the sidewalk subcommittee. Now, I'm going to bring in, we also can talk about meetings we've had. Some of us have been talking to council over and over again about the problem with the COVID-19 recommendations and also the problems with State Street reopening. And I won't say too much here. We'll wait until we have the reports. But I want to point out something that sometimes people don't understand, and I know the council did not understand this. I wrote them a long letter with my comments, and I got some positive reports back from the council saying we never knew that to happen. We never knew that was the rule. So I want to just make sure we're all in the same boat here. The only way that things get fixed in this town as far as accessible buildings or restaurants or stores is when they have a new renovation. They have to provide an estimate of the cost. The California Building Code demands that at least 20% of that cost be spent to make it more accessible, which is called the path of travel. That's the parking, the entrance, bathrooms, things of that nature. That's required by the California Building Code, and that's all based on what the amount of the estimate is. So the lower the estimate, the less work these people do. And we have to keep that in mind. And so some of these points we're going to talk about on the COVID-19 report are places that the building departments, not the department, but the builders can get away with not fixing things they should. And we can talk about that later, but I want to make sure we all understand that the only way to get stuff done is to use the 20% rule based on the total construction cost. So I'll leave that for later. Now we have a report on the State Street closure.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I would like to ask, that we take a small break. I do have a report coming up that I'd like to be able to bring up on screen. And since this is my first time around with this, Vince is going to work with me on this. So you can make a note for me to ask that we take a small break and move item 2 just before State Street closure and parklets. And I'd also like to ask that people do mute themselves when they are not speaking, because I can hear typing and other noises going on, and I'm sure it may be distracting to others.
that sounds good. Can you give us a rough time on how much the break is so we can leave our
I would say let's take a 10-minute break and come back at 10 to 11.
Is that okay with everybody? Okay, this is Jim. Let's do that 10-minute break, okay? Bye-bye.
Okay. I've not heard from anyone, but I guess we're okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Barbara, this is Barbara, fine with me.
This is Suzanne, fine with me.
This is Sean. I unmuted during Jim's because his audio went out like towards the end of his last little statement. So I don't know. I have good internet connection and my audio has been fine. I don't know why his audio went out, but did it go out for anyone else?
Yeah.
No, this is Bob Burnham. I'm fine for 10:50. I'm going to put on another phone. I have another landline phone. I have to plug in my cordless. I'm afraid the battery's getting low. So if something happens, I'll call back.
Thank you very much, Bob. This is Barbara. See you all in 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Sarita, I see you, but I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
I was muted, Barbara. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. So
Okay.
we're good to go here?
Yes.
This is Suzanne. I'm here as well.
Sarita,
just
this is
say-
Vince. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Vince.
Yes. When you come into items number 8 and number 9,
Mhm.
Bob Burnham, I'm back.
Great,
Nick
perfect, Bob.
Kuntz, I'm back.
When you come back to number 8 and number 9 in your meeting, Mr. Wheeling
Yes.
has a comment, so make sure you unmute him and allow him to speak in your attendees window. Okay?
Yes, thank you.
This is Jim, I'm back. Hey, Vince, are you there?
I am, sir.
Were you able to load the photograph from Mr. Railing?
Yes, we were, sir.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm going to mute myself until we are all back.
Fantastic.
Mr. Chair, should I do a quick return to meeting roll call?
That's fine. Has everybody else checked in?
Barbara is here, and I believe Suzanne. Nick Kuntz?
Suzanne's here.
Thank you.
Nick Kuntz here.
Sean Corral?
Here.
Janice Rodriguez?
Here.
And I know that Barbara Silver is back. Brian Moore?
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, we may begin with item number 8.
Okay, we're going to have a report here on the State Street closures.
Okay, very good. Thank you all. Let's see, I need to pull something up here really quickly. 8th Street closure. So as you all are aware, there is currently a temporary closure on State Street. It's closed. It's interesting, depending on which perspective you're coming from. Some people say that it's closed and other people say that it's now open. I guess I'm calling it a closure. It's closed to vehicular traffic right now from Haley Street to Sola Street. There was an ordinance that came out on May 22nd, an emergency ordinance, and it actually, I think, allows for the closure to go as far down as Gutierrez, but right now it's from Haley to Sola, and it allows for expansion of outdoor dining areas into the parkway and the street. And this is happening, I'd love to think that it was a Santa Barbara idea, but it was already happening in many other parts of the country, and it continues in a lot of places. The idea is to just create more space for social distancing. One of the things that the ordinance says is that access is required under the ADA and that it shall be maintained at all times, that access. Another thing it notes is that an area extending 7 feet in both directions from the center line of the closed street is restricted for the use of pedestrians only. It doesn't say in the ordinance, this is more in the Parklet guide, but I'm going to share it here, that the table spacing is supposed to be at least 6 feet apart. And then another thing that has become sort of the standard on this is to maintain at least 48 inches of a clear path of travel in the sidewalk areas. And for anybody who maybe has been tracking this since May 22nd, things popped up rather quickly, and they weren't all in compliance with these guidelines, and staff has been forced to rapidly make adjustments and reach out to the restaurant owners and to gain this compliance. And, you know, part of it is because the ordinance didn't spell things out extremely clearly, but it basically gave every restaurant owner the opportunity to do this expansion, many of whom have taken advantage of that, and maybe some have taken too much advantage of it, and therefore downtown parking staff has been out there. I know there have been a few in particular who it seems like every single day are pushing the limits, and Victor's out there trying to push them back. So, you know, with all of that was happening, I got some comments from Jim Marston about what he was witnessing out there. And so I invited him to walk State Street with me. And so Jim Marston and Bob Burnham and I walked State Street that whole length of the closure last week on June 17th, as well as Victor Garza from Downtown Parking. And we observed a lot of different things. It's a lot less standardized than it was in the times of regular outdoor dining, where we have an opportunity to review and approve plans. But one thing that we noted is that the different barrier types make a big difference for how certain members of the community are able to navigate that. And it was clear that ropes or certain inflexible barriers are not very helpful compared to a rigid or a solid type of a barrier, like a railing, or there's wooden fences, different things like that out there on State Street. And, you know, trying to keep a consistent path of travel rather than one that meanders, or at one restaurant is closer to the building, at another restaurant is closer to the curb face. You know, being able to look down the cross street from one to the next, and ideally having a path of travel as straight as possible. Those were some of the observations, and you know, having Victor there was really helpful because he's out there on a daily basis and is able to help. I don't want to say with enforcement, but just with keeping things in line with what the expectations are. So I don't know if the committee has any comments that they wanted to share or their own observations. It was definitely helpful to have Jim and Jim Marston and Bob Burnham out there, but different eyes, different users, different experiences, see things differently, and the feedback would be helpful. I can relay that to
I have a
Victor.
This is Suzanne Tejada. I have a question. Are a lot of the seating, the tables on the sidewalk, or are most of them located in the street? And there is a pedestrian path reserved in the middle of the street, correct?
That is correct. There's a pedestrian path that needs to be kept clear, 7 feet on both sides of, I think the ordinance says on both sides of the center line. It's really probably both sides of the crown of the street. Sometimes the center line moves around a little bit if there's a turn lane. But yeah, there should be 14 feet clear down the middle of the street for pedestrians. Obviously, there are bicyclists who are also using that space, and we're doing the best to message, to get the message out to the cyclists to ride cautiously and carefully. I think as the number of pedestrians go up, the speed of the cyclists should come down. So,
Brian, this is Bob Burnham.
Yes.
First of all, I wanted to thank you and Victor for spending 2 hours of your time, or as close to that, with Jim and me walking that route from Sola all the way down to Haley. It was hot and a little breeze, but it was still pretty good weather, but still wearing on the hips and the body. But I think there were a lot of things that were revealing. One thing you said, the inconsistency of restaurants to where they position their tables, some out from the building, some from the curb. And then I think the on-street dining will be addressed in the Parklet agenda item, next item. So I'll reserve comments probably with Nick and other people for that. But one thing I noticed that Victor did was each time he came to an intersection, he adjusted the barricades, because those are movable and they're going to remain movable throughout this opening / closure. So that's going to be a variable that we'll have to deal with. But a lot of the sidewalk is clear, aside from the normal items that were already there in place, planters and posts and pillars and things. But again, the restaurant and the businesses, some protruding pretty far out from the building. There was one area where I had to be guided through a narrow passageway because the restaurant seemed to have things situated where it was pretty a narrow path of travel to get through. So I think you were going to talk with that particular business, also with the one that had the simple rope barriers that are not safe for cane travelers, because the cane goes right under the rope, and then the stanchions that the ropes are attached to are wobbly and unstable. And I was just imagining myself falling through a rope into a table with people eating their meal and having a very embarrassing situation. So hopefully we can minimize those scenarios. Otherwise, I like the opening. The ambiance is pretty cool, but I know there are a lot of things to address in terms of accessibility, probably just as much for people in wheelchairs as there are for blind people. But I think it's a worthwhile experiment, and I hope it's able to continue.
This is Nick Kuntz. I have some comments on the State Street closure or opening, depending on your perspective. I have not been downtown much. I was down there the very first weekend, and I saw a lot of problems on the 500 block, I believe it was. I've heard that many of those issues have been addressed, but it seems to me that, hang on. Sorry, there was background noise here. I observed a number of problems there on the 500 block, and I understand some of them have been corrected, but from my perspective, we really need to encourage these restaurants to have their outdoor dining in the street instead of on the sidewalk. With very few exceptions, on the 500 block of State Street, there's very little room for both the required path of travel in the public right of way and the desire to have patio dining on the sidewalk. It's just not compatible. I know that some of these restaurants are trying to make their access to the in-street dining via the sidewalk, but because of accessibility issues and planners, landscaping, etc., that just doesn't work. And so we need to have access from the street as well. I do have a question. I understand that the status of the 1300 block opening is in question, and I'm wondering if staff can give us an update on that.
This is Suzanne Tejada, and I just wanted to reinforce what Nick just said. I think the seating should be more focused in the street, and the sidewalk should be for pedestrian access. So I just wanted to reiterate that.
And I forgot a general comment I wanted to make. I agree with Bob. The atmosphere is great. I love to see everybody out there. I'm generally in favor of the opening and the social distancing guidelines have made for a lot better accessibility inside what used to be very crowded restaurants, where the restaurant owners were not maintaining the required accessible aisle widths until the COVID outbreak, and now there's plenty of room for everybody. So I want to see more outdoor dining. My biggest frustration with the implementation is the crowding of the sidewalks, and the notion that, oh, we should just go out in the street and go around, but that's just frankly not acceptable by me personally or by the California Building Code.
This is Barbara. I did go down to observe, and what I saw was cyclists in the street, all over the street, including children. So it would seem to me it would be better to narrow the accessible path in the street and expand the path of travel on the sidewalk, so it was clear that pedestrians were on sidewalks and bicyclists and pedestrians, mixed use, were in the street. People are used to bicycle paths by now, but watching children and their parents on bicycles in the street was kind of breathtaking, I'll put it that way.
Any other comments? I think there's a question out there about the 1300 block. I don't have. Go ahead.
Sorry, this is Suzanne Tejada. One idea is to not allow cyclists on the street as well. I mean, if that's causing anyway, that's just another thought. It's a pedestrian street now.
This is Jim. I want to hear Brian's thought on a 1300 block, but I want to address a few things to Suzanne, especially, and other chair users. Before this thing even started, I wrote a letter to people saying you must keep a path of travel open on the sidewalk, and problems with accessible dining tables. And so one real problem here is that none of the tables I've seen are accessible for a wheelchair.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are too high, but most of them have the pedestal in the middle. So that whole thing has been just totally forgotten about. And the first day or two I was down there, people had the whole sidewalk blocked completely with fencing, the tables. You had to go out in the street, which meant across a curb.
Mm-hmm.
It was crazy. And what I really want to understand, Brian, and other people in the city, is, to me, the city just says to the owner or the proprietor, you must be ADA compliant. It's a huge thing to understand, the ADA, and so is the California Building Code. And I keep saying, why don't you just say, here's the requirement. You must have X amount of feet for path of travel. You must have an accessible table that has to be this high with this kind of pedestal. No one wants to put out the rules there. And so you're expecting a proprietor or a manager to somehow understand what it means. You must be ADA compliant. And that has led to all these problems, especially the first couple of weeks, where people just blocked the entire sidewalk. And if we just have I would like to understand why we just can't say, here's the rules. You must have this, this, and this, okay? Instead of letting people just go like the Wild West. And then we have to send out people to so-called police the area and tell them, no, you can't do that. And please, you folks in chairs especially, you know that if it's a 4-foot path of travel, there's no way to pass somebody. So if Suzanne's going north and Nick's going south, how are you going to pass each other with all these tables around you? So it's ridiculous. So
So there, yeah, agreed. And I really think that, yeah, I don't need, that's fine. That's good.
okay, and the other point is, we mentioned bicycles. What's really crazy out there is skateboards. I've been almost hit a couple times just walking down the center of the street. You got bicycles, guys doing wheelies, you got skateboarders, you got kids on little bikes, you got tourists looking around instead of looking ahead. It's a pretty narrow path of 14 foot down the middle of that street. But I still think we should move things more off the sidewalk into the street.
Correct.
But many of those places don't have a curb ramp. So people, if they can eat on the sidewalk, but if they want to go to the street, they've got to go to the corner and then go down the street again to get in. So I know it's been done quickly, and I just wish they could give the owners more input on what you have to do. What is the minimum path of travel and all that. So that's my comment. And Brian, you still are open to talk about the 1300 block?
Sure. Yeah, and actually, as I'm hearing all of these comments, I'm thinking it would be helpful to have, and it wouldn't have to necessarily be in like municipal code language, but just put together a little informational handout that can help these restaurant owners understand what their obligations are, because they don't know, like you said. And you can go online and do a search for ADA table and buy something that you're being told is ADA compliant, but it's actually not. So I think there's times when they think they're doing the right thing and they just don't even know. So maybe that's something that I can put on the list, and with this committee we can work on the format of that and the content of that, and then it can be something that you share with restaurants.
Brian,
Yes.
this is Barbara. We've had discussions with our committee before and your predecessors about making the accessible Santa Barbara, the page on the city website on access much more helpful to everybody. And we've gotten pushback every time we've asked. So that would be a place to have this information available to the community who's trying to find out what are the guidelines. It would be a natural place to put it so that people can go to one place and find the things that apply in this city. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Brian, this is Bob Burnham.
Yep.
Question for you and Jim. And Jim brought up a really good point. I think Nick mentioned something too about it. Is can we come up with a simple, dumbed down set of simple rules according to the ADA and the California Code to distribute ASAP to business owners and restaurants on State Street regarding what Jim just talked about? These are the rules regarding accessibility, path of travel, wheelchair access, simple things. Is there something we can come up with quickly and simply that will be in a language that these people can understand and implement and distribute to them readily?
Yes, I think so.
This is Nick Kuntz. I like the idea, and I hear the sentiment behind Brian's suggestion that we work with this committee. But frankly, by the time this entire committee comes to a consensus, COVID could be long behind us, and we need to move more quickly than this entire committee can, given the fact that we meet so infrequently. So I think that I'm hearing a need for another ad hoc subcommittee.
This is Jim. Maybe it's a far out comment, but the reason I wrote these things to city staff before it even opened was for them to put this in their handout to the restaurants. They chose not to tell them, so now it's up to the Wild West to figure out how to get away with the most tables. I don't know if it's something that the AAC has to even be involved in. The city staff, downtown parking, and Brian, they know what the rules are, and I can see that they can just put these rules together. I'm not saying we can't help, but it's something that the ADA coordinator and the city staff know what's there. If Victor Garza is out there patrolling and fixing problems, then he knows what's a problem and what isn't a problem. So it takes no big brain to say, hey, you have to do this. You have to have a table that looks like this. You have to have this kind of spacing. You cannot do this. You can do that. And these same
Yeah.
things apply to the parklets. The rules are there. We sent out, I think both Nick and I both found a copy of the San Francisco Parklet Guide that shows how to build the right one. And yet we have all sorts of inappropriate parklets being built now. And once again, someone has to go out there, get a complaint, and then these people have to tear up the one they built and build a new, more accessible one. It's a waste of time and energy to not have these codes out there ahead of time. So that's my thought. Do we really need an AAC involvement, Brian, or is it something that you and your staff can do?
Yeah, I think it's something that we can do. I mean, I'd be happy to share it with you, Jim, anyway, at least so one set of eyes from the committee has seen it before we finalize it. I think that would be helpful. It doesn't matter necessarily to me who is the reviewer. It could be any one of the committee members who's interested, but I think that would add value to whatever we produce.
I
Would
agree.
you
This
be
is Nick
interested in
Kuntz.
that? Go ahead, Nick.
Sorry, this is Nick Kuntz, and I agree with Jim's comments entirely. You know, we have individually provided staff with the guidelines that could simply be, you know, passed out, rebranded from one city to another, altered, whatever staff wants to do. And we did this ahead of the opening. And so I guess I want to retract my suggestion that we have an ad hoc subcommittee, because that would just further delay. If staff wants to produce this document, staff has what they need to do it. And I think the AAC is just slowing things down, and kind of feels like that may be by design.
May I suggest, Brian, that perhaps at our meeting next week that we can also review this? Can you have that ready in time? And then you'll have two eyes to look at the plans or the specs that you're going to come up with.
Yeah.
And I also wonder if Suzanne would be interested in that at all. I don't know how Suzanne, how often do you get downtown? Much?
Actually, I have not been downtown,
Okay.
so I cannot.
I'd love for you to go and see what you think.
Yeah.
And then
No,
get your input.
I would love to have the design professional input as well.
Right. Next week, unfortunately, I'm out of town.
Okay.
But I could do a follow-up, you know, after your meeting.
And Sean, what about you? Do you go downtown much? Can you take a cruise around and see what you see as problems?
Yeah, I'd like to be on that. My last wheelchair had 4,000 miles on it, so I'd like to say that I roll a good bit. So
Okay.
yeah, I'd be happy to.
Could you get down there and maybe contact me directly and just tell me your problems, and then we'll see about how to incorporate those? I'd love to hear from chair users. Okay.
Yep.
And Suzanne, you can't do that. You say this week you're out of town.
I cannot do it this coming week, but I'm returning on the 29th.
Okay.
I'll be back that week.
Well, so just to clarify, since Nick and I are meeting about Blue Curb next week, Brian, can you have something by then, and we can at least start the conversation instead of going to another ad hoc committee? Would that be good for everybody?
I think that's a great idea.
Sounds good to me.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to sign off now. So are we done? Are there any public comments? I think there is one on State Street opening, right?
And I'm still waiting to hear about 1300 block.
Let me share what I know about the 1300 block, which this will be quick because it's it's not a whole lot. And I think it's similar to what you may have heard if you've been watching council. So when that was closed, there were some business owners who expressed concern about the closure that far up and how it was impacting business. So staff thought about that, looked at that block and saw that there seemed to be less activity up there than in some of the other parts of the closure. So it was contemplated to roll that back. And as soon as that was contemplated, then the restaurants who are on that section, I think Carlitos in particular, they showed up at council and said, no, we absolutely need you to keep that section closed to vehicular traffic. So that's the latest that I know, and that's just been from watching the public comment. I don't know where staff stands on that. I think a couple of weeks ago it looked like it was going to roll back and be opened up for vehicular traffic. But
We had a public comment on this particular item number 8. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, that is correct. Accessible Santa Barbara has a presentation regarding parklets, actually. So that would be item number 9. If that's,
Thought there was also comment on number 9, the State Street closure.
8 and 9. So I'm going to bring up the slide for item number 8.
Okay, thank you.
And hopefully you can see this on the screen.
Yeah, Sarita, can you hear me? Can you see at the next to where it says 126% to the right of that, there's a blue icon to the right. Go to the right there. Now, if you click on that, now go to fit one page just under. There we go. Perfect. Okay, I hope everyone can see that. Hi, this is Will Railing, Accessible Santa Barbara. Before I pass along a few criticisms, I want to highlight the positive story here. I think everybody wanted to facilitate businesses getting reopened, people getting back to work safely, but quickly. And I just think there's been a lot of cooperative effort. I see staff putting in a lot of extra time. I think they've been doing their best to try to get everything as accessible as possible. So far so good largely, although we may well in the end be arguing that not enough is being done to safeguard the accessibility. But for now, we're letting the process play itself out. The thing to keep in mind, in all this discussion about the businesses, is this isn't really a situation like when we normally talk about businesses where they're, it's a private business with an issue with accessibility. So yes, these are businesses, but everything we're talking about here today is the public right of way, right? It's the city property, it's under Public Works, it's under Brian as city engineer and ADA coordinator. So it's important to remember that the city has an ADA Title II obligation to make the public right-of-way accessible and maintain that obligation. And it can't delegate that to private entities. So some of the lessons that I am taking away from this so far, I mean, first, when it was first announced that there would be 6 feet distancing, I mean, I watch Dr. Fauci all the time. I have, 6 feet social distancing on the brain. And so, of course, that's what was supposed to be implemented on State Street. I don't understand how that magically was reduced to 4 feet. And I was kind of looking forward to this experiment of as if the ADA suddenly was changed to 6 feet. But instead, it's essentially only being enforced as 4 feet, which is admittedly all the ADA requires. The other lesson I take away is this issue of having an ordinance and then rules. Because if you put your accessibility requirement and some detail in your ordinance, it's in there. It's in there for everybody. It's clear. And the city, and probably other cities too, have had this practice of passing an ordinance that makes a general statement, and then it's left up to implementation through rules that are issued by the department, in this case Public Works, and enforced by the department, Public Works. And there's a lot less transparency there. There's a lot more ability for someone to exert political pressure. There's a lot less consistency. So I think that's a lesson to take forward on future issues that come up. So now the city, this Title II obligation to maintain accessibility in the public right of way, I believe really does include, if you're going to allow people to build things like parklets, and we'll get to that in a minute and on the next item, but or create an outdoor restaurant area on the sidewalk, I'll just limit it to that at this point, that there's an obligation, at least when you receive a complaint, to address inaccessibility that your private licensee is creating. So I agree with the comments that were made about some of this. When you have a sidewalk seating area, there needs to be at least one accessible table per code. And then I also agree that the 4-foot path that's supposed to be the minimum maintained now on the sidewalk, that needs to be maintained. So this photo, I hope you can see, is just an example where I think can be a little problematic in the current implementation, because this is a place that really went to the minimum width. So that's all the State Street you get where that person in the blue shirt is standing. And I'm sure that's 4 feet, but that is a service counter that the restaurant set up right at the property line there. So customers have no choice but to be standing in the 4 feet clear area. And then the bottom part of the photo is what happens when a few people start to come by, where it's really, it seems to be a bit of a mess from a COVID-19 perspective, but also not necessarily being kept clear. So I'd like to see the city on the sidewalk seating, at least, we'll start putting in complaints and at least requiring there to be at least one accessible seat in each one of these sidewalk areas. And really maintaining.
Uh-oh, what happened?
I got muted by accident, but I was finished.
Yes.
I was finished. I just would like to see the city enforce the accessible seat requirement on the sidewalk. And this might be a pipe dream, but I think a 6 foot width, as originally contemplated would be a better thing, both for accessibility and for COVID-19 purposes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reilly.
Okay, so did you hear the end of my comment?
Yes.
Okay, all right, that's it then. I'll save the rest for the Parklet item. Thank you.
Chair Marston, are there any other comments on number 8, item number 8, State Street?
I wanted to thank, this is Nick Kuntz. I wanted to thank Mr. Railing for his astute insight there, always appreciated by me, and to support all of his recommendations. I think that it's really sad that that we have this 6 foot recommendation for social distancing, but yeah, we'll clip that down to 4 feet for the disabled, so the disabled don't get the same social distancing benefit or security. And I don't think that's okay by any moral standard, at least.
And I'll just point out that even if we had a 6-foot path of travel, if there's a person in it, then they're much less than 6 feet away from the tables. So social distancing is supposed to be 6 feet between people, not just an open path of 6 foot. You put one person in there, or you have people dining on both sides of your walkway, then it's a 3-foot or 2-foot distance. So this has nothing to do with social distancing. All these rules here do not have any 6-foot distancing.
Well, and let me just say on that, with the social distancing, which is definitely a separate issue, but you'd really need to have like 10 or 12 feet in order to maintain 6 feet away from people, because, you know, when you're passing by them, you're not going to be right up against the building or against a table or whatever it might be. So any of our city sidewalks, pretty much anywhere, they're 6 feet wide. If you're passing somebody on that sidewalk, you're entering into that 6-foot space. So that's why you see signs, especially on State Street, that says masks are highly encouraged, because it is impossible to always maintain the 6 feet. And that's why the masks are a key part of stopping the spread. I just wanted to point that out. There's, you know, if you're leaving your house, you're going to enter spaces where there's some risk, and protecting yourself, following all of those measures is helpful. But yeah, even a 6 foot wide isn't going to solve that problem, unfortunately.
Okay, if there's no more comments on number 8, we'll go to number 9, which is the Parklets program. Brian?
Okay, so very closely related to what's happening on State Street, and in some cases, you have parklets that are on State Street. So I just wanted to start out just by answering the question, what is a parklet? And the city put together a parklet guide. I think it was just, I think it's online, but there's been some revisions, and those revisions should be posted today, or if they haven't been already. It says a parklet is an innovative way to add gathering space to public streets.
Brian, this is Jim, to interrupt. Can Sarita get those pictures out of the way and put the agenda back up?
Certainly.
And Brian, do you have a slide at all for this, or just to talk?
I don't, no slide.
Okay. Sorry for the interruption.
No problem. So yeah, parklet is an innovative way to add gathering space to public streets. They're built and maintained by neighboring businesses, and they're located in the parking lane adjacent to the curb. Some of them also overlap onto the parkway area, and they're designed as an extension to outdoor dining areas. Any food service business permitted to operate under state and local public health directives may create a parklet. There's, like I said, there's already a number of these on State Street, but this applies to wherever outdoor dining occurs. They must meet certain criteria to qualify, including a parking lane width that's at least 7 feet wide. The parking zone should be unrestricted, so that's non-painted curb. The adjacent roadway speeds need to be less than or equal to 25 miles per hour. And then there's other categories where, you know, if the speeds are higher, other things where, per the guideline, the restaurants are recommended to contact the city for guidance. There are certain things, though, that are certain areas that would be prohibited, and that would include red and blue parking zones, as well as travel lanes, including bike lanes, and within 40 feet of a bus stop. One thing that I wanted to share with this committee, because I think they'll have some comments on this, but we have determined that the parklet is an extension of the outdoor dining area for that particular restaurant. So although we're encouraging, and I would say strongly encouraging restaurant owners to make their parklets fully accessible, if they do have equivalent accessible seating adjacent to that area, it would likely be in the parkway area, then the parklet itself need not be entirely accessible. But they would have to have the minimum number of equivalent accessible outdoor seating, and it needs to be equivalent. It can't be a table that's sitting off to the side that nobody wants to be at.
Brian,
I think
Bob Burnham.
Yeah, go ahead, Bob. That's all I really had on this.
I have a question. I think when we did our walk, we took a little detour on some side streets and looked at some parklets, I think either on Victoria or I forget what streets they were on. Is there an issue, maybe Nick or Jim could respond to this too, is there an issue with parklets taking up city parking spaces and in conjunction with that, interfering with existing blue curb parking spaces? I thought I heard something about that. I wanted to throw that out.
Yeah, it would be an issue if it was interfering with a blue space. The guideline says that it's prohibited within the blue zone, which definitely makes sense. I think it might be a little bit different on State Street where you have a closure to the street. So those blue zones are, they'll come back when State Street opens again, and that parklet would have to be relocated or truncated. Bob, are you talking about an area where maybe the parklet is not occupying the blue zone, but it's so close to it that it makes maneuverability challenging? Is that?
Yeah, I thought we saw some that were bleeding over into an adjacent property, and I'm not sure if those were on State Street or on a side street, but we were talking about some parklets being not accessible and pretty far away from the nearest curb cut or accessible means to get to the parklet that is supposed to be accessible, but not quite a lower level or a minimal level of accessibility.
Bob, this is Jim. I think you're talking about at Opal, which has a blue curb, which also serves the Arlington Theater very closely.
Yes.
Now that street is closed right now, and they put a parklet right there on top of the blue curb. But as Brian pointed out, as long as there's no traffic, then it's not really important at this time. But Brian said something I hope we can make sure happens. He said when the State Street is open, those will be restored. And Jim Dewey also thinks that one should be restored. So we don't want to lose that one, because right now they put a new blue curb across the street, across from Carlito's, but then to cross to get to Arlington Theater, you've got to cross in the middle of the block, which is not nearly as safe as the one that was there originally. So I think, Bob, that's the one you're thinking about. And they also took out more than just one parking space. That there by Opal, they stretched out their parklet. And I
This
think
is Nick Kuhn. Sorry, Jim, I thought you were done.
I had one more, if I can skip to the other thing for Brian, then you can talk. Brian, you mentioned that in some instances, they can't have an accessible parklet. Do you mean the accessible table, or do you mean there's a raised barrier to get into it. So when you say accessible parklet, do you mean accessible by a wheelchair, or the tables themselves are not accessible?
Access to the parklet itself.
And you're saying that's okay, not to allow access to the parklet itself?
Provided there is equivalent outdoor seating that is accessible in an immediately adjacent area.
Okay, because I was told that you now are using the San Francisco guide, which certainly says it must be level with the sidewalk. So that's where I'm confused on, can they really put a step there so that the wheelchairs can't even go into the parklet?
Yeah, that some of our streets have so much of a crown in them that putting it level with the sidewalk, you end up with a parklet that has so much of a slant to it. If it was flush with the curb, that the seating situation wouldn't really work. So some of these have begun to be built with a step. Ideally, it can be constructed so that there's also a ramp. So that's what we're hoping to see with any of these that have a step.
My fear is now we're saying that if you can't build it accessible, it's okay, because we have a different problem with the curb or the crown. And I don't think we want to admit that it's okay to build stuff that are not accessible because of some problem with the street. I hate to think that we're going to agree with that. That's just my comment.
This is Nick Kuntz, and I agree. That's an unacceptable precedence to set. I'm very concerned about the parklet that is in the blue curb, where our ordinance and guidelines specifically say it's not allowed. I think that it's a pretty weak and shaky position that it's only allowed because the street is closed. And I think that we're going to have, that's the only blue curb on State Street. It's one of the few blue curbs in the downtown plaza area, or the central business district. And we have such a shortage of blue curbs in the city, and we have this committee and myself personally, I joined this committee to try and affect change with the shortage of blue curb parking. And all I've seen is a blue curbs being taken away. And I've seen staff present a perspective that they're adding it, but I personally audited that data and found the data to be grossly inaccurate. Almost 50% of the purported blue curb inventory didn't exist. Much higher number of the existing ones were non-compliant than compliant. We've had ongoing discussions for years now about getting more blue curbs, and it isn't until COVID pops up and a blue curb is taken out that downtown parking suddenly decides that they need to put in another blue curb on Arlington Avenue to accommodate the businesses land grab. And it's just unconscionable. I'm really at my wit's end, and I don't know where to go from here. And I think the situation that Bob was trying to reference might have been, I may be wrong on this, but I heard some scuttlebutt about an inaccessible parklet on I believe Figueroa. It maybe not Figueroa. Yeah, I think it is Figueroa at the can't remember the name of the cafe, but it's off state, and I think that might be the one that Bob was referring to.
Savoy Cafe?
No, Nick, I think that was that the Milk and Honey?
No, I think Savoy is the one I was thinking of, and I don't have personal insight there. It was just word of mouth, I'd heard about it.
Excuse me, this is Barbara. I see what's happening here and that we're scheduled for a break and we're running out of time. Can we talk about rescheduling the continuation of this meeting?
I'm able to let this meeting go long.
So am I. These next two items are very important. It's, when you say we're running out of time, do people have to leave or can we get to the last two items?
Is Brian available?
I need to head home to relieve my wife who's with the kids. I can go probably a little bit past noon. And I think it would be important to talk about that item number 12. For item number 11, I could send you all the latest capital budget, because that was going to be more of an informational item anyway. I could just send that out, and if you had any comments on that, you're welcome to let me know.
Thank you, Brian. This is Barbara. I just didn't want to run out of time before we got to number 12.
And this is, this Chair Marston, I think that's a great idea. Let's do number 12. Any other comments?
I agree. Well, I do want to get to number 12. I've seen the budget, and I'm not an accountant, so it's a little difficult for me to interpret what is exactly going on. And based on recent discussions at council, I feel like maybe there's a little bit of a shell game going on. The AAC members might not be aware that staff recommended some budget cuts to council recently, and one of those issues, one of those recommendations was to completely defund the ADA transition plan for this year, and that was the only line item that was being recommended to be pulled from the general fund. And I was shocked and appalled, and brought that concern to council, and council agreed with me almost unanimously and sent it back to staff. And I don't understand the new proposed budgets. It seems like money was just shifted around, and it's going to be something of a zero-sum gain. But I could be wrong on that. I'd like to hear staff's take, and also can staff comment on the status of the McKenzie Park bathroom project, which was supposed to be in this fiscal year?
So we're kind of jumping ahead on items here. I think we should wrap up item number 9.
Okay, I think we have a public comment from Accessible Santa Barbara.
And getting Mr. Reeling. Mr. Reeling, are you ready?
Yes, can you hear me?
Okay. Yes.
Okay,
You have 5
great.
minutes.
Thank you for putting up that picture, and thank you for allowing public comment, even though we're running short on time. Look, I mean, I'm not happy with what I'm hearing, so I'll just be blunt. The city has an ADA Title II obligation not to allow inaccessible construction in the public right of way. These parklets are construction. They are an alteration under both ADA and CBC. The construction in an altered area always must comply. There is no COVID-19 exception to the ADA or CBC, no shrugging of the shoulders. Sorry, we couldn't make this one accessible. Okay, it's wrong, and worse, it's illegal. Okay, the city has a Title II obligation not to allow the inaccessible construction. The restaurant has a ADA Title III obligation to have every outdoor seating area accessible. Sitting in an enclosed parklet and that sort of comfort, if you've seen some of these, is simply not the same as sitting out on a narrow sidewalk. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but I've read enough of these cases to predict with some confidence that a court would likely not agree with the city's argument here. So please look at this photo. This is one of the first parklets that was built. Okay, it's serving a politically influential business, shall we say. It's completely inaccessible, and that is inexcusable. And I'm basically putting the city on notice here. I mean, Accessible Santa Barbara is not a litigation organization. We're an anti-litigation organization, but we pursue administrative remedies. So we will put in complaints. We will put in grievances. We'll contact the DOJ. We'll contact the state DFEH. We'll contact whoever we need to expose that this is just simply not correct, to tell this particular parklet that it's fine, that they are prohibiting people with disabilities from using their parklet. And if there's something with the street, whatever was mentioned about hydrology or slope, well, guess what? It just means that you can't put a parklet every place someone might want to put a parklet. You can't just say, well, we couldn't make that one accessible. So forgive me for getting a little bit heated, and that is what I have to say on that subject. Thank you.
Chair
Mr.
Marston here, I appreciate those comments and those pictures. They certainly show that it's not accessible for the public. Thank you.
This is Nick Kuntz, and I completely agree with everything Mr. Railing had to say, and I'm frankly very grateful to have his input and interest in the city's accessibility.
Any other public comments for number 9, the parklets? Brian, I'll just say, I don't know what we can do, but I think that Mr. Railing brought a very strong statement up there. I also agree that you cannot build stuff that's inaccessible. And the city, I think, is taking a big risk to approve this. Okay, if we can now, back to the budget. Can you just, what Nick said, Brian, can you just make sure that this thing you're going to send out is very clear to the non-bureaucratic financiers out there, and just say, it used to be this amount was spent for that, now it's going to be this amount, and the other money was put into this account or general funds or whatever. Just let us know in plain English what's happening with not just the transition plan, but the money spent on fixing things from the transition plan. So we have 2 items. One is money for the transition plan itself, a new one, and the other money was for fixing things. And if that's clear, Brian, I'll
Yes.
say we can then start on number 12, the COVID-19 recovery business advisory task force.
I still have a question about if staff has any insight into the status of the McKinsey Park bathroom project and bringing that 30-year-old commitment up to code.
My understanding is that project will be funded with FY21 funds. And I'm sorry if you heard that for FY20 and you're hearing the same story you heard once before. And if you're skeptical, I could understand why you become that way. But that's what I was told, that FY21 dollars, which are available July 1, will fund that work. Mackenzie.
So it's scheduled to go ahead as planned.
Yes.
But excuse me, this is Barbara. We were talking about construction will go ahead or planning will go ahead, because I remember there was some confusion about where the money was going first on that bathroom. So is it construction we're talking about with July?
I don't think the construction starts immediately, but what I can do, I can send out the budget, and then I can also give a schedule update for that particular project.
Okay, thank you, Brian, because this committee has been involved with a lot of, I'll just say, unpleasantness over the planning for this facility. So
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Sure. Okay, then the last item that you're going to hear from me on is this COVID-19 Recovery Business Advisory Task Force. And this is something that I think Jim Marston has helped me to be aware of this, because this is a community development led effort, not Public Works, and I've been trying to get myself inserted into this process a little bit more. But there was a council meeting, I think it was on June 2nd, where 10 recommendations were presented. This was the Business Advisory Task Force is a group of basically interested business and development people throughout the community. And they've been working on recommendations to try to basically help their cause, which is development, obviously. They put this list of 10 together and they sent that to staff, who presented it to council on June 2nd, but there wasn't really much detail discussed. Council told the staff who presented to have community development staff review that list of 10 items and report back to council with more detail. It turns out that's happening on Tuesday. That would be June 23rd. The staff report just came out last night. I hadn't seen it until it was published. I didn't even know who was working on it until recently. But there's an attachment to that staff report that lists each of those 10 recommendations, and it includes staff's initial response and the budget impact, if there is any. And I know that there are particular items that this committee is concerned about. And at this point in the process, what I would recommend for this committee would be to review that attachment and participate in that meeting on Tuesday if you have any concerns. I mean, at this point, if you share it with me, there's not, I think it will be more effective for the council members to hear from individual members, not just of the public, but of this committee. And yeah, just to participate through the public comment process on Tuesday. I'm just trying to get up to speed on all of these things myself. I did have a very brief discussion with Andrew Stuffler this morning, and one thing he did tell me was that they wouldn't be recommending anything that gave them less purview than what they have right now.
Brian, this is Bob Burnham.
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Two quick questions. Can you email me those the 10 points of that?
I will email the whole committee the 10 points and the staff initial response to those 10 points. I can do that right away.
And then the second question is there a way to phone in and participate in public comment to a city council meeting? I think Will tried to send me something, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure that'll work or not.
Yeah.
Is Vince still on? Is Vince still on? I guess not.
I'm looking to see if Vince is still on. I know that Vince is still on. He's Subcommittee. If you go to the agenda, it has instructions for how to sign up for public comment. And that would be for city council. I could get back.
I can pursue that first and see if it works.
Okay.
Thank you.
My experience is it's very similar to this format here in most respects, but I think you won't have the benefit of Vince and his assistance with technology glitches. I may be wrong on that. If that is available, it's not as apparent during the city council discussions as it is here in the smaller group. I want to give a little bit of feedback on this COVID advisory task force. From my perspective, the 10-point bullet list, wish list from the downtown businesses was a blatant power grab, a blatant effort to take advantage of COVID to get around what they see as limitations that they've been trying to get around for a long time. And they're looking to this municipality to usurp our rights, our civil rights, under ADA and California Building Code. And there were 5 items on this list of 10 that all had far-reaching implications for accessibility. And I gave council my perspective, and council was shocked. As was I, that list came across as a list of demands, actually, and it was completely unvetted, and I expressed concern that the disabled community is not given an opportunity to be a part of the process, to give feedback. That, you know, I found out about that list to kind of 11th hour and had very little time to present my perspective to council. And the sentiment I got from council was, I got a personal email from a council member, as well as comments, public comment or response to my public comment from multiple council members and the mayor, that it's unfortunate that we're not considered stakeholders in these efforts. And here we are having a meeting discussing this, and there hasn't been adequate time for us to review staff report in time to send up a recommendation from this council to staff to consider before it goes back to council. So once again, we have to give our comments as members of the public. It's better than nothing, but I don't think it carries the same weight as recommendation from this specific council. So I would encourage everyone on this council to take an interest. There's huge implications, particularly with items 2, 4, 5, 6, and 10. 2 says limit the plan review scope of work and provide complete initial review. And my concern here is that the California Building Code requires review beyond the scope of work to confirm accessibility compliance. And the staff response talks only about zoning and doesn't mention building code at all. So I'd appreciate it if staff could confirm that this is not intended to limit the building code plan checker scope of review. Can you comment on that, Brian, before I go on?
I can't get into detail only because I don't no, that's going to be
okay.
Andrew's team.
Yeah.
But definitely a fair question. And yeah, I can try to get that answer. I know Andrew's tough to get a hold of these days, but that's a fair question to ask.
Okay. Number 4 talks about their no challenge of third-party construction valuation estimates, which allow applicants to provide third-party valuations of existing property improvements for the purposes of flood proofing, electrical undergrounding, and other thresholds. And the key there is in the other thresholds. Anytime, as Chair Marston mentioned earlier, anytime a building undergoes any alteration, they have to look at the expenditure on this project, on the current project being considered, and any other project in a 3-year period. And if it exceeds a threshold valuation, which is a moving target, but at this time, I think it's around $162,000. Then their obligation for accessibility under the California Building Code goes from the scope of this project to the scope of the entire facility, has to be brought up to 100% compliance. So this is a way that, you know, if they limit, if the restaurant or other downtown business limits our ability to challenge third-party construction valuations, it gives them a real easy and convenient way to reduce the amount of ADA improvements that they have to contemplate on this project. And it's I want to caution, and I know that the staff is well aware of the risks involved with this, and I am certain that it will be challenged, and this is going to be a huge liability for the city of Santa Barbara. 5 and 6 I have concerns about, but the staff response leaves me inclined to leave the detailed analysis of those to the upcoming appeals board meeting. But I encourage the rest of this committee to dig in and understand and follow that. And number 10, I want, sorry, I said staff, I meant the rest of this committee. I encourage you all to dig in and follow along. Number 10 says to designate the entire central business district as 100% zone of benefit. And my concern here is that the disabled citizens of this community are likely not aware of the implications of this recommendation. This is a zoning issue, but it will have a massive detrimental impact on the already limited ADA parking in the central business district. So just so you all understand, any building in the 100% zone of benefit means that there are no requirements for parking at all, and thus there will be no ADA parking requirements. If the downtown parking staff were more amenable to the Blue Curb initiative that I've been pushing for many years now, I would be less concerned about this. But since it seems to be staff's opinion that Blue Curb parking is a more of a problem for staff than for the disabled public, I don't have a lot of hope that we're going to get any traction on this. And after 4 years of trying to engage the city in the kind of process that Accessible Santa Barbara espouses, a diplomatic process, or I can't, the terminology Will uses is escaping me now, but I'm feeling increasingly inclined to believe that my only option is to pursue legal remedies.
Thank you, Nick. I appreciate that. I have a comment, first of all, for everyone, including Mr. Burnham. I'm aware that 3 people at least sent in comments on this 19 or 10-point plan to the city council, and also called in. And our liaison, Megan Harmon, told me when I asked her what was the best way to be heard, she says, I think what you guys did was right. Send us an email with your concerns, but please follow through so that after all the thousands of emails they get, they now have a voice saying, and this is me saying, here's what I said in my email. So please at least send something written to them, but if you have the time, to follow up with a phone call just to say again what you said in your email or just parts of it to remind them about it would do a lot of good. Now I want to talk about that plan because I do have the new 10-point plan from the city. And like Nick, I think I'm very perturbed here, but I want to point out something to you. First of all, this is called the COVID-19 Business Advisory Task Force. Please understand that 4 years ago, the same group of builders, developers, rich folk, whatever you want to call them, had the same 10 points. That was way before COVID because they want to overhaul the whole accessibility. They blame accessibility construction on why they have vacancies. One has vacancies because their rent's too high or the business can't afford it anymore. Milpas doesn't have the same problem. So to blame accessibility requirements is ridiculous. People move out of an existing building, not because of accessibility, because there is no rules as long as you're there. What happens is once they move out and someone else moves in, there might be an accessibility requirement. And then, of course, it slows down progress, especially if you fight it for 2 years. So this whole thing called COVID-19 Business Task Force is a complete sham. This is the same 10 points that was given out 4 years ago. Keep that in mind, okay? Now, Nick, I thought we were brothers because you had a lot of the same comments I was going to make. So I'll just be real quick here. Number 2, limit plan review to scope of work is ridiculous on 2 points. One is they cannot find out whether this is going to, they cannot use this to stop the path of travel that's required by CBC and ADA. My other concern, whether you're a pro-growth or slow growth, is that right now this is saying that if you decide to cheat and build something without a permit, once it's done, you can now say, oh, that's existing. You can't ever catch me on that again. So this is going to really push the envelope on how many people are going to do work without a permit. And once it's there, we can never challenge it. So this limit review to scope of work, remember, scope of work is what the developer tells you it is. He says, oh, we're just putting in a new stove here. We're just going to tile this kitchen area. That's what they say the scope of work is, but it's not that. So this is really, really a problem area. And I think that I'm going to write to Andrew and make sure he gets these points right away, and I'll write to the council on Monday. Number 4, Nick covered 2, no challenge to third-party construction valuation. I would love it if the IRS said, we're going to allow me to guess what my income was last year, and they're not going to challenge it. Or I can make my own grades for grad school. Come on now. What kind of a right-thinking person would say, oh, we're going to let you tell us what to base your fees on or how much you're going to spend on accessibility based on some number that you make up. They already make up very low numbers here. There's times when the evaluation comes in at $50,000 and then the owner gets up to city council and says, oh yeah, I spent over $1.5 million on that thing. So it's completely fraudulent, but you cannot just trust a third-party construction estimate. And remember, the code says it should be based on construction cost. It never even mentions estimate. So this is a really phony thing. 5 and 6, I'll agree. Both of those are going to go back to the building review, but there's no challenge of accessibility if plans are done by a CASP, which are, of course, paid for by the developer. So, of course, it's going to be one-sided. Number 6, my only problem is that some structural engineers actually stamp the whole entire plan, including accessibility. So we'll work that out in the Board of Appeals. And like, I'll just add what Nick said about the central business district being 100% zone of benefit. Imagine if they build a 60 or 80 unit apartment building downtown and no parking's required to be disability. And no parking's at all going to be put in, but no blue curbs either. Ridiculous. And what Nick didn't mention, and I have a fear of, right now you have many private parking lots, such as in the back of their building or something. And if this goes through, they're going to say, hey, I don't want to have that accessible spot anymore. I'll just get rid of it. So this is a big problem here, number 10. And I'm going to write letters, and I hope other people who are interested do that. But please keep in mind, has nothing to do with COVID-19. I think that's all my comments on that one. Any other comments or questions from the committee members on what
Jim,
they can do?
Jim, this is Bob Burnham.
Yeah, Bob.
Question, what is the timeline? I'd love to submit comments. I've not seen the 10 points yet, so hopefully those will be gotten to me ASAP. What is the timeline to submit comments to Megan Harmon and possibly other council members?
Well,
Virtually non-existent.
Right.
They're going to be taking another staff report to council on Tuesday. So you basically, you know, I think you need 24 hours to prior to the meeting. So, you know, you've got one business day to respond.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
And Bob, I would suggest not just to Megan, but she keeps in right to everybody there, okay? Now, if you don't have those names, you can get them from the website, or you can just send it to the clerk, which has to hand them out, but that's a slower process. So I would recommend getting the names of the council members. If they all get your comments.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
I've
Nick.
been sending my comments related to this to the clerk, so it becomes a matter of public record on the meeting agenda. That is the official position or guidelines, as I understand it, on the city website,
That's
council
correct.
website. And but in addition, I carbon copy or directly address every council member and the mayor, and I've been including staff members as well that I think should be aware. I've been including Brian, I've been including Andrew Stuffler, and others.
Nick, thank you. And I was just to help Bob out, is it possible for you to send Bob the total list of your emails so he
Sure.
could copy and paste? That would really
Sure,
help out.
I'll forward one of the emails I sent, and it'll have the list of recipients.
Okay, but
Thank
he might have a hard time finding that and copying it. Is it possible just to send it to him in a different format?
I can try.
Okay, and does anyone else like that? They want to, I think this is very important for us to show our support about these things are pretty much a takeover of accessibility in town. And if you think it's bad now, wait till you see what the developing community want to do.
Well, this is Barbara, and I wanted to make a comment, and that is for people to realize that at least 3 of the city council members are rather new, including Megan, or very new. And this is really an education project from the ground up, as well as our informed complaints. So with council changing and with our committee changing, there's always this problem of the history disappearing. So Jim, the list of 10 that you had previously, is there some way we can access that and compare it for ourselves? Is there an online document someplace?
Well, I think I heard Brian said he was going to send it out. I mean, I have the stuff here, but I'd rather.
Oh, okay. But I was talking about the one from 4 years ago where you said this is exactly the same. It's a scam to say it's COVID because it's an old list.
I don't have that one, but if you listen to the audio discussion a few months back, you'll hear one of their members saying, this is a farce. We already asked for these things before. So I don't have the actual proof that it's the same exact one, but they asked for these back in 2016, okay?
Okay, so at least 3 of the council members are new since then. So
at least, right.
So
And-
we have an extra burden to bring them up to speed.
Well, I just don't want them to think this is somehow a COVID thing, because what I forgot to bring up is when the COVID crisis is all over, this is still going to be the law. And also, let's say there was 20 to 30 vacancies on State Street a couple years ago. This so-called COVID-19 changes is going to, of course, go to them.
Well, I think
That's-
it's important, and it's important to make the point that this is not new and this is not just COVID. And because otherwise that's not clear. That's not clear.
Right. But
So,
if this gets passed, they're going to apply this to every vacant building on that they can, including ones that were vacant 5 years ago. So it's a farce there. If it's just for COVID-19 recovery, let's just do it for those who have COVID-19 problems, but they don't.
okay, well, thank you for making that point.
All right. And I will say that Megan also brought up the fact of the new council members. All of us on this committee have breaks in our knowledge of the ADA and CBC, right? Imagine being a new council person and has no idea what the heck we're talking about. So we need to spell out to them, this is what this is all about. And their job is all sorts of things, budgeting, safety, community, racism, all sorts of different things they're dealing with. They're not, they know less than we do about this kind of stuff. So we have to educate them.
Okay, well, that was just my point, that it isn't the same old council we're dealing with. It's the same old developers, but not the same old council.
You got that right. It's the same old developers.
And I notice in George Buell's resignation letter, he is joining them. Did you see the last paragraph of his resignation letter?
Yes, I did. Rumors are now he's going to go with the Tobes Group, which is a...
I don't care which group. He said he's joining the developers. I was so amazed he would put that in his letter.
Yeah. But I'm just saying, I don't think it's going to be a local developer. I hope it's not.
Well, maybe not next month, maybe the month after.
Yeah. Pretty interesting to have a new job before you even announce your retirement, though, isn't it?
Well,
Nice
he obviously had an ongoing relationship with them. He had an ongoing relationship.
And some forethought, too. Okay. I hope that other members can do something with the council. If you need any advice or something, you can feel free to write me or others. Bob, did you have a statement? Okay, do we have anything else that needs to be brought up? Well, I want to thank everybody for hanging in there for this time. We got most of the problems solved eventually. I hope the next time it runs smoother.
Comment?
Discussed, if not solved.
Public comment?
Right. Public comment on number 12?
Yes.
Sarita, do you have a comment for 12?
I see a hand raised, accessible Santa Barbara. Do you have a public comment on item number 12?
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kuntz made reference in his comments to the accessible Santa Barbara philosophy. So let me just say briefly what it is. We were formed in reaction against abusive ADA litigation. Our mission is to pursue administrative processes to improve accessibility. I think administrative might have been the word he was looking for. Enforcement by building departments, advocacy in public meetings, administrative processes which are not litigation, like grievances, such as grievances or complaints to state or federal agencies. So I certainly hope we don't lose Mr. Kuntz to the shark-infested waters of litigation, and I'll keep working to try to find administrative processes as alternatives. Now this item, the 10-point list, I just want to try to put it into a little bit of an overall framework, because everything before this that we talked about today was about the public right of way and the city programs and activities and construction. And this item is all about the relationship between the city as a regulator and the industry that it regulates. And just to put that into the proper framework of who has what duty, it's the applicant that has the duty to comply with the building code. When they don't, it's on them. Meanwhile, the city has a duty to enforce the building code provisions And it has a little leeway in how vigorously it does that. So that's really what's at issue with these demands. The city has been above average in its plan checking. I've said many times that that has saved applicants from countless violations. What the city's plan check process has done in many instances is basically save applicants from themselves. You know, do you ever look back at how mad you once were when your parents wouldn't let you do something that you wanted to do, and then years later realize how much trouble you would have been in if they had said yes? You know, so I just want to close finally with just a huge thank you to Brian and the committee. You guys have done something a little different here, and it's great. And you know, when you have topics that are timely and need to be discussed, it used to be, well, we don't have staff available from that area, so you would have needed to have, you know, people from downtown parking and people from you know, to come to talk about these items. And you know, this is a great alternative. I mean, yes, it would be great to have more staff on this call, okay, but when people aren't available, you plow ahead, you have a discussion because it's timely and you don't have that many meetings. So I'm really glad to see that. I thought it was really constructive, and I hope that that practice continues in the future. Finally, just to Sarita King and Vince Wong, I mean, you know, we had a little difficulty in the beginning of the meeting, and I've been on a bunch of these public meetings for the city, and so I can guarantee you that none of this was their fault. I mean, this is a difficult platform. I've been writing the city since April about the accessibility issues with this platform. You know, Sarita's been a great commission liaison for many different boards and commissions. Vince Wong, I heard of him before he joined the city. He's essentially a legend in the IT training world around here. So I just wanted to close with a big thank you for everything you guys have done today.
Thank you. Well, I have one request. Barbara had mentioned my comment about the COVID-19 being an old list from years back. If I remember right, you were tracking them back then. Is there anything you could get to Barbara about anything you know about their old list or the comments that they made, anything like that you could share with her offline?
Sure. Can you still hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. You know, the Business Advisory Task Force that came up with these recommendations has had a series of meetings. To its credit, the main meetings, not the subcommittee meetings, but the main meetings are on video and posted on the city's website. And that was essentially the reaction to some of the members when they first received these recommendations. Aren't these the same demands that we've been making for years? I mean, there was a little frustration in that person's question, but it's essentially true that the crisis became a reason to ask for changes that were on the wish list for
Well, let's
several
just
years
say a
beforehand.
reason. Let's just say an opportunity to take the ball and run with it once again.
Sure. I mean, I think, you know,
You're being
believe
charitable, Barbara.
Yes.
Well, I am too. I mean, I think that, you know, in the larger picture of a group of city and business leaders getting together and trying to come up with recommendations, yes, they had short-term recommendations for things to do immediately. But I can't say I blame them for coming up with things which they sincerely believe would be better for them and better for the city. You know, there's a tendency for people to think that whatever is good for them is also best for the city, right? It's human nature, right? So, but I believe that they're sincere and plowing forward with what they consider to be more structural reforms, even though as other people have commented, I personally also disagree with several of the specific recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you
This is
again, Will.
Janet, can I comment as well?
Yes.
Will, I really appreciate your comments. Your very level-headed attitude toward the city and working with the Accessibility Committee should be commended. I'm right with you on believing that taking a moderate approach, we have a whole new crew working with us here at the Access Advisory Committee, both several members of staff and several members of the committee. And I believe having a negative intro and starting off with a negative, making assumptions that they're not wanting to comply with accessibility would be to our detriment. Businesses need to get back and get open. And so in the rush to do so, maybe they weren't thinking of all of the accessibility issues. And that's where it's imperative that the city steps up and looks at the guidelines and they understand all the accessibility requirements and codes. So they need to be the ones with our guidance to go back and say, you know, we need to reconfigure these parklets and those kinds of things. But if we proceed with the assumption that they're out to get things or to get ahead, is to me the wrong approach.
I look, I largely agree. I like you, I mean, sorry, I don't mean to speak for you. I don't have a disability. I have family members with disability. That's what got me involved in this world, right? And I have to say, it's not just in Santa Barbara, it's in all sorts of state meetings that I listen to. I hear enormous frustration from the people who really need the accessibility with the fact that it's taken 30 years of ADA and there's still, in their mind, not sufficient progress, and in their mind, actually backsliding, things going in the wrong direction, you know? So I make it a point never to criticize the negativity. I mean, I understand it, but I agree that it can be sometimes more constructive to, you know, give people the benefit of the doubt, accept that they're advocating for what they're advocating for in good faith, and yet still draw the line and try to stop them when you think they're doing something that would hurt accessibility. So that's my philosophy. So thank you for saying that.
Well, that's well noted. I appreciate it. Yeah, the frustration, I'm sure, mounts with each item that comes up that isn't accessible or is reduced. So I appreciate that comment. Thanks.
Well, I want to thank you again, and particularly this time for reminding me that administrative solution was what I'm looking for. I had that philosophy before I heard you articulate it. It's why I joined the AAC. It's why I continue to stay involved with the AAC and the Fire Safety Code Board of Appeals. And I am not a litigious person. I have never been involved in any sort of litigation to date, knock wood, and I don't want to be. I would take no personal satisfaction in bringing legal action against a business in this city or to drag this municipality into any such nastiness. But there comes a point when I've exhausted all other resources. I have been trying so hard to get staff to consider the ramifications of the two issues that brought me into these roles were parking and the accessible bathrooms. And the deeper I went down this rabbit hole, the more it seems to me that the city is complicit in obstructing my civil rights. And unless I've been very hopeful that Brian seems to have at least more empathy than previous people in his role. And it was my hope that we would make inroads together. But if staff doesn't get involved and help push some of these, then I'm just spitting into the wind here, given all this feedback, and that's a complete waste of my time. And so I'm going to get off my soapbox and try to end on a positive note. And you reminded me also that some staff members have done fantastic job here today. Sarita, I want to thank you for your help coordinating. I know that you're in a new territory here, and we've got hiccups to work through, and I appreciate your efforts there. And Vince, I hope that my comments earlier in my frustration with the technology here and how it was creating a challenge for Mr. Burnham, I hope you did not take that personally. I know that you did not choose this, and I appreciate all your help.
Thank you. This is Sarita.
Sorry, I thought I was talking. This is Jim again. Are you there?
Yes, Jim?
Okay, I just want to, again, thank Sarita and Vince for their work. I'm glad everybody could hang in there. And the one nice thing I like about this format is we used to be told we wanted to have more meetings, but no, the rooms weren't available, staff wasn't available. To me, I think this would be a way to we could have extra meetings or at least have a quick get together on one or two important items. Just have a quick special meeting on something that's coming up, using this program. And also, as Mr. Railing said, even in the future, when we get back to meeting in person, we could still use this to let people who can't travel to our meetings have input. So I hope we can keep the digital world going alive for us. Thank you very much, everybody. If there's no more comments.
Well, this is Barbara. I just wanted to say, yes, we wanted to meet more often as this committee had in the past. And so
Yes.
when we were turned down, it was very frustrating, turned down arbitrarily for the reason that there was no space.
All right.
So.
And now we have a way to do it. So are there any other comments?
Yeah, this is Vince Wong.
Okay.
Hi, Chair. I just want to thank everybody in the members of the board for your leniency today in learning how to do this meeting for the first time. I think we have worked out some of the kinks. I thank you, Mr. Coons, for your comments about that. I did not take that personally, but I took it as a learning experience to advocate for you even more. And I am new to this. I was put in this role because I was a trainer, and I'm learning more and more, and I thank you for that. And for myself, I will try to learn more about how to make things accessible for everybody as well. So as long as you guys are all willing to work with me, we will make that happen for you guys.
Vince, I have a quick question. Who puts you in this role? Because it's always invisible to us who behind the scenes is managing things. Who do you report to?
Well, I report to the IT department, Barbara, but since I was the trainer to train all the city meeting coordinators on how to use this software, I was asked to help out Sarita, and I just voluntarily, because Sarita is a good colleague of mine, I voluntarily sit on this meeting for that purpose.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and then also for Mr. Bill Welling, thank you for those kind words that you said. Again, everyone, we will try hard as a city. We will always try to make things accessible to everybody. So as I learn more, we will share more with you, and we'll make these things happen for you guys. Thank you again, everybody, for your patience and leniency.
Thank you, Vince. Should we end with a kumbaya? No. Okay.
I want to say one last thing. I think that
Okay.
it's wonderful that this historic meeting is taking place on Juneteenth. So, which may be a public holiday in the years to come.
Yes. Okay. It's been enjoyable and very informative. Thank you all. And if you have any questions about writing to council, let us know. Okay. Thanks for everybody's input. I'm going to adjourn the meeting now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, Sean, are you still there?
Everyone.
Yeah, I'm still here.
I'd love to show you around State Street if you haven't been down there and get your input.
Yeah, I was probably just gonna roll each block.
Okay.